Good morning, everyone. I am MJ Sedlock. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the president of the Faculty Senate and at UMaine and a senior lecturer in the School of Performing Arts. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this morning's town hall and to introduce Joan Ferrini-Mundy, president of the University of Maine and the University of Maine at Machias, and vice chancellor for research and innovation for the University of Maine system. I'm very pleased to be with all of you today and to continue the tradition of co-hosting these town halls in collaboration with the president and other members of our administration. I feel it's vitally important that our campus budget is developed with input from a wide range of voices and perspectives, and that it's done with transparency. These town halls are just one of several ways in which we can work to accomplish that. So I thank you all for being here with us, and I'll turn things over to President Ferrini-Mundy to get us started.
Thank you so much, MJ. Good morning, everybody. Happy first day of spring, and welcome to our town hall to focus on the fiscal year 24 budget. Several members of the panel that you can see in front of you will also be chiming in, so I'm going to start by asking them to introduce themselves briefly. I'll go around my screen and ask that Megan Walsh begin.
Hi, I'm Megan Walsh. I'm the Dean and Campus Director of the University of Maine at Machias. Good morning.
Thank you, Megan. Robert?
Hi, I'm Robert Dana. I'm the Vice President for Student Life and Inclusive Excellence here in Orono and in Machias.
John?
Good morning, everyone. John Volin. I'm the Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs here at the University of Maine and University of Maine at Machias.
Kelly?
Good morning. I'm Kelly Sparks, and I'm the Vice President of Finance and Chief Business Officer here at the University of Maine and the University of Maine Machias. Good morning.
Diane?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Diane Dunn, Senior Advisor to President Ferrini-Mundy, and hopefully here just to make sure that we don't have any IT glitches in the background. So thank you and good morning.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Meredith, Margaret, and Serge also to introduce themselves, although they're mysteriously, okay, there's Meredith. Meredith.
Good morning, everyone. Meredith Whitfield, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer.
Recording in progress. Serge?
Hi, I'm Serge Drage, University of Maine System IT for Zoom and other telecommunications needs.
And Margaret.
Good morning, Margaret Nagel. I'm in Marketing Communications.
So thank you all for joining. Thanks to all who've helped with the technology and the announcements and the communications and the planning for this. I'm looking forward to this as a discussion. As I look at the numbers of participants going up, I want to remind everyone, as we've done in the past, we'll keep a running list of questions that you're able to, send to umaine.alerts@maine.edu. So if you send your questions there toward the end of the session, we'll work to get those answered. Kelly will be showing the slides, so we'll take a second to get the first slide up. Okay, so this is the announcement of our meeting, and I do want to welcome back those who've been on break, those who've been away. We're here now for the beginning of the rest of the semester, and looking forward to all of the great things that happen in these next coming 6 weeks, including spring and all of the celebrations that we have, as well as commencements. So we'll jump right in. Here's the table of contents, essentially, for what we'll discuss today. A little bit of an intro. I want to be clear that what we're doing is providing you with a preliminary budget review, and to remind everybody that budgets really are plans. By way of context, we are still in fiscal year 23, which doesn't end until the end of June in 23. And so although we produced a budget about a year ago for fiscal 23, we've had adjustments and changes and mid-year corrections. And we still will no doubt have some changes and corrections all the way to the end and close of 23. Yet at the same time, we're working on fiscal 24. And that's what the topic of our meeting today is. Take a look at that planning, at what we will be presenting to the Board of Trustees in the coming weeks as our plan and proposal for fiscal 24, and the challenges that we face, as well as the opportunities going forward. We'll talk about specific priorities. We'll talk about residence and dining, and give the budget overview in more detail. So with that, let me begin by a bit of a foundational reminder. We've had a number of successes, new programs, services, research, multiple planning efforts, and here's just a part of the list that I wanted to highlight But part of what I'd like to focus on here is the confidence that so many organizations ranging from our congressional delegation to the University of Maine system, to our board of trustees, to the state legislature, to the governor, to the federal agencies that fund the grants that so many of you successfully submit. They see the University of Maine as a strong and growing organization. And in some of our areas, I'll highlight particular successes: engineering and computing, with the continued work funded by the Harold Alfond Foundation to bring together engineering and computing learning opportunities for students in Maine and beyond. The work in that same project, that same grant, to do undergraduate research learning opportunities, the RLEs. Again, so many, I imagine, on this call have participated in offering those or taking them. Our research enterprise is strong. We are providing more and more support system-wide through UMaine leadership. We've had Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan funding, success with earmarks, and then all the planning efforts, which I will not list, but you see them here. And it's that planning that stands us in good stead today as we look at our budget for fiscal 24, figure out how to prioritize and determine where we'll meet, how we'll meet the challenges that we have. So I share those with you so that you're aware that we will be drawing on documents and priorities all the way along that we've been working on for some time now. Kelly will take this slide in a bit more detail, but the story for fiscal 24 with our draft budget, our planned budget at this moment, which is still March, is based on a conservative yet realistic revenue projection and expense assumptions. And you can see here, and Kelly will go into more detail, that this doesn't look in balance, at least as we begin our planning process. And we have strategies to bring it into balance. We have, of course, faced a number of challenges with enrollment this year, potential declining enrollment going forward, inflation, our aging infrastructure, the rising costs of energy, changing student and staff needs, and more. So I'll let Kelly say a bit more about what to make of this slide.
Thank you, President Ferrini-Mundy. So starting with our process, we've started our revenue planning process with a conservative yet realistic approach to tuition and fees planning. Provost Volin will talk in a moment about enrollment, but we have used a flat or slightly down enrollment target, down by approximately 307 students for our tuition. So that's about $185,000 down in terms of tuition and fees. There's some good news with state appropriations. We anticipate an increase in about $4.4 million in state appropriations. And thanks to the good work of the research office and all of our research faculty across campus, we also anticipate an increase in a little over $1 million or $1.1 million in indirect cost returns coming into the institution. Although with all of that good news, we're starting this year already with a little bit of a structural deficit. So as a reminder, as we ended fiscal year 23, or as we come to a close with fiscal year 23, we're down approximately $15 million in revenue versus our initial plan. Coupled with that, we're seeing rising costs in terms of our energy costs. In terms of inflationary increases anticipated around 4.9%. And we also have a really strong faculty and staff community across campus who we want to honor with compensation increases coming into this year. We are also managing our scholarships and our tuition waivers very differently with our financial aid office. So we do anticipate some savings or some benefit or a reduction in our overall expense base. But as we go into FY24, we do anticipate a slight imbalance in our overall plan. We'll talk about our solutions coming up in a moment.
Okay, I think we can go to the next slide, and when we get to the solutions, we can go into much more detail about what we're looking at. And Provost John will take this one. Back one.
Can you go back a slide? Yeah, no, 2 slides back.
Sorry, my computer is stuck.
That's perfect.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Kelly. And as Vice President Sparks just mentioned, we are budgeting for a relatively smaller incoming class this coming year, as you can see on this slide, which will be the second year in a row that we are replacing this larger class with a smaller incoming class. We're being conservative, as the president said, in our incoming class estimates. And really, this is to align with the previous year, even though we are really focusing right now on an intensive yield campaign and have been for the last few months. We anticipate that the overall efforts we're making to improve recruitment and retention, as I'll talk about in a moment, will help offset this decrease, but the impacts, likely will not be really felt until fiscal year 25. Next slide, Kelly. Great. So I'll start this off and then turn this over to the president. Here, as you can see, to address our priorities, we're looking at recruitment and retention. I'll talk about that and speak to that, and then turn it over to the president for research. And these are our key areas that we're focusing on. In this last year, we've worked really hard with leadership across the colleges, enrollment management, financial affairs, FATI Senate, et cetera, to design a new strategic enrollment, recruitment, and retention plan. And this is an action plan for 23 to 27. And it really seeks to expand our market and improve our yield. Because honestly, if not only do we need to increase that recruitment, but then we need to hold on to our students that are here. And we want to make sure that they graduate. And that's really where our growth will come from. And so to do this, we're going to be, and this strategic enrollment action plan will come out in the next week or so. We're going to focus on, attracting all learners, right? Transfer students, adult learners, online learners, in addition to our traditional age learners. We're going to expand our offerings, through articulation agreements with community colleges and pathway programs, our 4+1 and 3+2 graduate programs, and of course our online programming. And also we've already, in this last year, been doing a lot of work on improving our processes in enrollment management, which includes predictive analytics and financial aid leveraging. And so these are areas, I'll speak a little bit more in the next slide on some of this, but for now, I'll turn it over to the president.
And I would just I'd like to say that although we have recruitment and retention in one place and research in another on this slide, really these areas all come together for us here at the University of Maine. And you've heard us speak about this before, the idea that our outstanding research enterprise is really available to our undergraduate audience. And that's a distinction for the University of Maine. And I owe special thanks to our researchers, our academic affairs staff who've tried to make that happen in the last couple of years in a way that we've not seen before through the research learning experiences by enabling first-year students to join scholars across the full set of domains of the university in course taking and field experiences and all sorts of opportunities to get a feel for what it means to engage directly in inquiry. So we can go to the next slide. In order to keep that research focus, of course, strong, we have to be bringing in external grants, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But the provost will tell us more now about our student success and retention efforts and our goals.
Great, thank you, President. So as you can see here, this is a student success and retention kind of focused slide where our fall 21 cohort retention goal was and where we're looking for fall 25. We know there are three major areas why students generally don't persist at university. One is that personal connection and support. You can put the mental health, increasing issues here in this first bucket. The next one is the academic success, how they're doing on their academics. And the final one is financial access issues, or a combination of all these together. What we're showing below are the UMS Transforms student success and retention efforts that are underway. These are by far, they're amazing and they're wonderful. But of course, there's a lot of other areas of student success that have been worked on, at this university and continue to work on. We are looking at expanding the research learning experiences. Right now, there are 5 majors that have these actually as requirements for their incoming students. We have over 50 sections because of the amazing faculty and staff here at the University of Maine, Machias, starting this fall for our incoming students. You can see that we're starting the gateways to success. These are for those very difficult, large introductory courses. There's over 20 of them here at the university that have relatively high DFW rates. And FATI again are jumping in and doing their, to try to improve retention and success of our students in those courses. So of the 6,000 seats that are available for students, fully 2,700 of them seats are going to have interventions this coming fall. And finally, we'll be initiating the Pathways to Careers. These are, internships that will be kicking off this fall as well. There's currently a request for proposals out that's due at the end of March. So a lot of exciting things happening at the university in this front, and it's really been an all hands on deck, and really want to throw out a big thanks to all the faculty and staff that are helping make this, a success.
Just remind everyone that you can send your questions to umaine.alerts@maine.edu. We'll shift now to the very closely related topic, actually, of research. And this graph gives you a very good feel for our research portfolio taken in a comprehensive way. So this shows you totals for all of our external grants and contracts and internal dollars that are spent annually to support our research enterprise out of a variety of funds within the university. So you see these extraordinary increases, but what I'd like to focus on are the indirect cost returns, the figure in yellow here, the line graph, as well as those numbers. The indirect cost returns, the F&A recovery that comes from the federally funded, largely the federally funded external awards, is a vital part now of our planning in our budget work. And you see those numbers increasing, and we're deeply grateful to the research and development community, to those who brought in those external grants that spin off the F&A return, because that becomes a part of how we both continue to grow the research enterprise, but also support the other parts of the campus that are vital to the research enterprise and that are helped by it. So the message here to those who are bringing in external grants is we're delighted that you do it. You make a difference in your scholarship, but at the same time, as you spend those dollars, it's critical to the whole university, and we're very importantly, I think, focusing on that at this point. So thank you for this. Next slide. Many of you are aware that I also have the title of Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation for the system, and we've had a lot of questions about what does that mean. I thought I'd speak to it briefly here. The purpose of that position and my role in it is to help expand research across the entire University of Maine system through my Vice Chancellor office and hat. And so I want to point out that that actually also is vital for us here at the University of Maine, at Machias, as we find colleagues across the system who'd like to be part of the research, development, and innovation infrastructure for the state of Maine and beyond. And so here are the areas where we are working closely with, where I'm working closely with Vice President Cody Vararami and Jason Sharland and others to be sure that we are enabling our own infrastructure for research to be very robust, but to bring in colleagues from around the system and to find ways to support them and connect them here at UMaine as appropriate. So I did want to mention that. It's tightly tied, of course, to our wonderful R1 designation, which we need to sustain through a variety of approaches. We'll turn to Kelly now to hear more about other reasons for our challenging budget, and also to begin to look towards solutions.
Thank you, President Ferrini-Mundy. Our auxiliary budgets are directly tied to our enrollment at the University of Maine and at the University of Maine Machias. Our incoming first-year class, as well as returning students, result in our residence hall capacity. So we do anticipate having a fairly robust number of the available beds that is directly proportionate to that incoming first-year class. So we anticipate a slight decline here on the Orono campus. And looking at the University of Maine Machias, we anticipate a slight increase in those numbers due to returning students on campus. I'm going to turn it back to President Ferrini-Mundy to talk about the guiding principles that we've used to establish our initial budget.
Great, thank you, Kelly. So as we look to the future and do this work of planning for fiscal 24 and beyond, I want to first start with some principles that we'll use to guide our activity, and to invite you to add to these and to raise your questions about them as you wish. UMaine.alerts@maine.edu. But first and foremost, we're an educational institution. And so offering the very best possible learning experiences for our students is our primary goal and emphasis. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves all the time that any decisions that we make need to be guided by that principle as we go forward. It will require that we are creative in realigning staffing as vacancies and retirements occur. A couple of the questions that have come in already have to do with that process, because we are an evolving institution. This is a dynamic institution. Educational institutions always are. And so as we look forward, we look toward where students' interests are. We look toward new learnings about pedagogy and instruction and how we can apply them well in our multiple classroom and learning settings and so forth. That will have implications for how we think about our capacity and staff going forward. We need to focus on increased enrollments and retention, being sure that we are an accessible and inclusive university that offers the programs that fit us well, but that also attract our students and that sustain them into careers and lives that will be rewarding and rich. And so we want to be a place that is attentive to the students that we bring here, and to know that the students that we bring here will range in a multiple set of dimensions in terms of their choices for coming to higher education. We constantly need everyone's best thinking about innovative revenue generation ideas, and we can point to some things that we are already doing as a university and looking for more. And then, as I mentioned, with research, bringing in those external funds and spending them is what generates indirect cost recovery, and that's vital to keeping the overall enterprise going. We are open to more guiding principles and to more questions, and this should be an evolving document as well as we go forward. We'll start now to say a little bit more in detail about the kinds of growth opportunities that we have and the opportunities also for efficiencies and savings going forward. And I'll turn to Kelly in a moment, but I'll just say here that it is our expectation, it's expected of us as a university, I guess, as well, that we achieve a balanced budget and that we prioritize everything from operating efficiencies to growth opportunities over the next 3 years. And so we'll be talking in more detail today and in the weeks to come about how we expect to do that, seeking your input, your ideas, your concerns, and your great innovations as we do that process going forward. So this table has a lot in it, and Kelly can talk us through some of these bullets, but at the bottom I want to point to the fact that we do have targets over the coming years that we are including in our planning currently for both efficiencies and growth. And I'll turn it to Kelly.
Thank you. So I think it's important to note, first of all, that our plan to work our way towards a balanced budget will be over 3 years. So we will be working collaboratively across campus to work on both growth opportunities as well as efficiencies in the organization. So to talk through a couple of the examples of the efficiencies, we're looking at financial aid management and optimization. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Financial Aid Office for some very good initial work that we have done to plan. Really, this year is around management, and next year will be around optimization. What we've done is we work to centralize where we are issuing those scholarships from a central office so that we can ensure that we're managing the dollars that we have available to spend and getting those to the students in the most expedited and efficient way that we can. We anticipate a significant savings coming from this bucket. In addition to that, as Provost Volin mentioned, we'll be working to optimize those dollars. So really thinking through new ways that we can get those students to the students who are in most need to maximize the use of the available funds to attract them to the University of Maine and the University of Maine Machias. That will be coming in the following year. We'll be looking at campus for administrative efficiencies. So this is everything on campus from how we leverage our supplies and services across campus. It's also about how we leverage our resources in terms of our human resources and supporting those vacancies of positions that may occur over time. We'll also be looking at policy enforcement. And the example that I use here is that we spend about a little over $345,000 a year on bottled water on campus. This may be an opportunity for us to rethink how we leverage some of our funds so we can put those dollars back into what I would call higher and better use of our people and other things that may be needed to teach and to do our research on campus. We'll also be looking very closely at our physical plant. I think it's fairly well known that we have some opportunities in terms of we have windows that can be broken. We have some structural things that need to be fixed. And this results in higher than necessary energy as well as maintenance costs on campus. We have an incredible facilities and operations team that are managing with the resources that they have to keep our current state the best that it can. How can we make some improvements there so that we can drive down some of those energy costs, both in the short and the long term? We'll also be looking at instructional and research realignments over the coming years. So how can we think about as faculty retirements may be occurring? Provost Volin will talk a little bit about that, I think, in the Q&A. How do we replace those positions for the highest and best use? How can we think about research realignments or administrative support organizations that are supporting those areas and think about how we maximize those resources we have across campus? We'll also be looking at current gifts that we have or external funding that may already have come in and looking to maximize those as expense offsets for the campus. But as importantly, we'll be focusing on growth. Provost Volin discussed our first year enrollment and our retention goals that we have. We'll be focusing on the good work of continued increase in graduate enrollment. We'll be looking at opportunities in online education, additional community serving programs, an academic portfolio analysis, increasing indirect cost returns, as well as potential corporate partnerships to increase our overall revenue streams. Over time, we've calculated between both the efficiency side and the growth side. You'll see in year FY24, 15.3 million in efficiencies. I do want to call out that financial aid is almost half of that as we go into the year. So the number seems a little bit less ominous when you think about that we've captured that already through financial aid management. But over the next 3 years, we will strategically use the reserves that have been put there by the folks who have come before us to help us move our way through. So leveraging an additional 13.2 million in the coming 3 years. So to talk a little bit about where we're at with reserves, we do have a healthy reserve pool on which we will leverage for 3 years. We will then begin to replenish that. So there's 3 buckets here that I want to call out. First is the green line. That's our GASB 75 line. Those are post-employment benefits. We don't touch that number. It stays there. We want to look at the blue bar and the orange bar. So the blue bar are E&G unrestricted reserves. Those we can spend on those necessary things that we have within the budget. So you'll see that number will come down slightly over the next 3 years. We'll then begin to grow that after that again back to a healthy place in the future. We also have designated reserves, and I'll just call out auxiliaries there. Our auxiliaries, because the lower than necessary occupancy in our residence halls, which also result in meal plans. We'll be leveraging a little bit of our auxiliary reserve in year 1 and building that back up over time as well. I'll turn it back to President Ferrini-Mundy to talk about how you as a community can help us achieve our FY24 budget goals.
So obviously, there's a lot of work to do, but we also maintain, I think, a very positive and forward-looking view as we do that work together. So different members of the community can be involved in different ways. Certainly, planning for curricular and instructional innovation is likely to lead us to all kinds of good outcomes, including improved enrollment, improved retention. You've heard Provost Volin speak a bit about the student success and retention efforts, and we can talk a lot more about that as we go forward, but we look to find ways to offer some incentives for faculty and staff who are interested in trying some new things in their teaching and helping to support their work in doing so. Leveraging grants, engaging students in grants. I see a question in the Q&A. I'm sorry, MJ, I'm going to jump the gun a little bit. There's a question that says, if our research funding and indirect have increased and seems to have such a positive impact on students, why are our enrollment numbers down? I think that's that's more complicated than only the increase in research. But it goes on to say, if we are primarily an education institution, what is the plan to create better balance? We largely are an instructional institution that happens to have an outstanding research activity connected to all of that. And we are a place that engages undergraduates extensively in research. I think we need to do that more and more intentionally. And I think that ultimately will enhance our enrollment as students have these great experiences with all of you who are engaged in research and scholarship. So that's what I would mean by leveraging grants. We get some external money. Finding ways to bring our students into that work, I think, is an important piece of moving forward. Watch for savings in your day-to-day work. We heard about the water. There will be other ideas that you'll get as you think about all of this, I'm sure. Strategically use external and one-time resources. The dollars that Kelly mentions that are in that designated reserve category may include some of these kinds of resources that can be deployed when we have one-time expenses and that help to save on our E&G side. Generating ideas for efficiency, always welcome. Proposing opportunities for growth, very welcome. And many of you will recall the Define Tomorrow activity that we had a couple of years ago in the pandemic to look at ways to have savings and also to come up with innovative revenue generating ideas. We'll reinstitute a version of that website to take community ideas on this going forward. So watch for that as we go ahead. And the math part of me just couldn't resist this. You hear everybody, next slide, please, Kelly. Hear everybody talk about inflection points. So here is one. And we are at one, I guess I would say, in some interpretation. If you take the curve, the point to represent where we are right now, we, in my view, are at the beginnings of increased change and improvement at a faster speed, in a sense, than we've been at before. So much is happening right now in higher education, in our state, at our university. We have great plans in place, great ideas being generated, and we have challenges and we need to reach fiscal stability. So we'll just keep moving and look to all of you for your good questions, your good ideas, and your observations as we go together for the future of the University of Maine. With that, I think we can take the slides down, Kelly. We may need to come back to some of them, but I'm going to ask the two panelists who haven't yet had a chance to speak to say a few words if they would like, and we'll begin with Megan Walsh.
Thank you, President Ferrini-Mundy, and thank you to the other panelists for sharing all of this information that I think is so helpful. So at Machias, some of these questions have been with us for maybe a little bit longer. We know that. And we're very much focused on the undergraduate experience here. And really all I want to say is thank you so much to our facilities and maintenance staff for all the good work that they are doing and will be doing in the upcoming months. Thank you as well to our student affairs staff for all that they're doing. And thank you to everyone who's at Orono, who's been working with folks in Machias and students across the two campuses to really come together and join in what I like to think of as the Bold Coast Black Bears Project. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Megan. And Robert.
Well, I would say that the old yarn that it takes a village to raise a child is apt here, in that everyone that I know of and every focus of this budget continues to be student centricity. And it does take each and every one of us in terms of extending lifelines to our students, making the experience vibrant and rich, making the in-class and out-of-class experiences consonant with each other, meaningful and valuable across a wide spectrum. So I think we have to keep that foremost in mind, is that even though some days the news might seem bad, we have before us the greatest opportunities really in a generation. These students need us and they want us, they want this experience, and our focus needs to be wholly and solely there.
Thank you. And now we'll turn it back to MJ to moderate the questions.
Great, thank you. I'll just let all of our panelists know as I start here that we have about 9 questions that have come in about 20 minutes. So if we want to get through them all, looking at 2 to 2.5 minutes per question to try to get in some of these. I'm sure we could talk about for the whole 20 minutes. So just giving that as a precursor there. So I'm going to start by trying to combine 2 questions that have come in about faculty replacements. And we've talked about those being in high impact and growth areas, but looking for some more information about the criteria being used in that, and also what kind of transparency we can expect for the choices made about which positions will ultimately be funded, and how that decision was made about what is high impact, what is growth, et cetera.
So I'm happy to jump in and start on that question. This has been something that we've worked very closely with all the deans on over the last year since the SRI actually started. We are 2 broad categories. They're in kind of replacement in high demand areas and investing in growth in strategic areas. Again, done with all the deans and based on the SRI, and it's very data driven. So we are looking at overall student to faculty ratios in majors, in credit hours produced, looking at using the Delaware study to benchmark to other universities, looking at where each of these major units were in 2017 versus today, how they'll be impacted by the SRI, because of course, it wasn't evenly distributed who decided to go into the special retirement incentive. And so that's really, has driven all of this, and is in looking at what's called Lightcast now, but that's the burning glass data to see, where the projected growth is in the future. So it's been really data driven, a lot of iteration with the deans on this, and trying to be as strategic as possible.
Thank you. Can you talk about the impacts of program reviews and how those reviews are being conducted, both in relation to potential faculty hires and just generally the goals and guiding principles of that process?
So if we're talking academic program reviews, those are just the general program reviews that are done on supposed to be on a 7-year process. So those are being run like they always have, and we have a calendar of those, and so that we do 5-6 reviews a year, of course, and then accredited programs do it differently. I think what Vice President Sparks was talking about earlier was academic portfolio evaluations. That's something that we'll get a committee together with deans and others, and really look at kind of optimization of how we offer different courses, things like this, working with every unit. So I think there's 2 possibilities there. We're not changing the academic program review process.
Thank you. We've talked today a lot about planned yield, recruitment, and retention initiatives to help address these budget issues. Can you talk about how those programs will support online students, and how UMaine Online generally is thought of as a strategic element of these plans?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take that one as well. One thing that we have that is really excellent here is the Division of Lifelong Learning has online advisors that really help early on with helping potential students navigate programs here and bring them on board and really help them on board. For a key for those programs moving forward, though, it's just like students here that are in person. We have to focus on mentorship and advising. Those are critical areas. And one thing that launched a number of years ago now is EAB Navigate as an example, and it wasn't consistently kind of done across the whole university. There's certain units that are using it really well, but for that to really take off, we have to be consistent across the whole university. So we're actually planning on working with every unit across campus to relaunch kind of a campus-wide, a renewed use of EAB Navigate, hopefully this coming academic year. And we'll really focus on providing those wraparound support services to those students that are most at risk at not being retained, and to try to differentiate retentions based, really on what we've learned through data analysis. And so that will include our online students as well.
Thank you. Let's jump to, I'm going to read the question, but I think I'm going to start the answer of it. There's a question about the composition of the General Education Stewardship Committee and the goals and guiding principles of that committee. So I'm going to start that because the General Education Stewardship Committee is a committee that comes out of the Faculty Senate. It is largely driven by faculty with representation also from the Office of Institutional Research and Assessment, International Programs, Student Records, Advising Center, Division of Lifelong Learning. But ultimately, general education revision is driven by the faculty, and that, as I'll address here, has both positives and negatives, I would say, in the sense that it's great that faculty own the revision, but also it's a sticky and messy, difficult thing to do, especially since our gen eds here on campus have not seen a revision in, I believe, 20 plus years. So in terms of goals and driving principles, we want to create gen eds that students understand the value of, that aren't just a checkbox for completion for them. One of the first things that committee is interested in doing is adding a general education requirement in experiential learning to go along with some of the other experiential learning initiatives that are happening on campus. Overall, there's also an interest in reducing the total number of general education courses available. There's currently over 900 that qualify at this time, so that, and in doing so, therefore making gen ed easier for students, faculty, advisors to navigate and understand, and in the end, ultimately create a model that can be continuously reviewed, something that we can continuously look at and make small improvements to, so that we're not looking at 20 years from this revision having to have such a heavy load to do in the future. I'll be honest that the work on it has happened in fits and starts, and hasn't been as there hasn't been as much progress as many folks here, myself included, would hope to have had by this point. But that doesn't negate that there's good work from some really passionate people who really care about this issue, trying hard to find not only a way forward, but really the right way forward that sets us up for that kind of, continuous future success. So that's kind of gen ed revision from my perspective, and I'll turn it to you, John, if there's anything you want to add about that.
So no, you did a great job, MJ. I'll just add that, yes, first of all, the faculty own the gen eds, absolutely. And we're here to partner and help it any way that we can. The Faculty Senate did set up also an ad hoc committee of general education last year around this time, that has been meeting as well this year to spur kind of, the gen ed group has been meeting for like almost 4 years now to work on these changes. And so I agree with MJ, it's a little bit of fits and starts, but hopefully heading in the right direction.
Thank you. All right. The university budget, we know has been cut. This isn't the first time, continuously, perhaps for a decade. At what point do those cuts make it so that we can't meet the growth goals that are outlined? And a feeling that many employees are already covering the work of 2 or 3 people. How much can we sustain while still having a growth focus?
I think I'll start it, if that's okay, MJ, and turn it to Kelly if she has anything to add. It's a great question. Higher education across the country faces these sorts of challenges. It's a pretty straightforward matter of can we match our revenues and our expenses? We have to find a way to make that balance work, and there are many factors that cause that to be a challenge this year and in past years as well. We're trying to do a couple of things a bit differently here, beginning this year. One is heightened transparency and discussing this with all of you as much as we possibly can, being respectful, of course, of our need to also talk to our board and others about these matters. Seeking ideas. I'm very mindful of the part of the comment that indicates that many people are doing the jobs of 3. I know that, I see it. I thank people for their incredible commitment to these universities. But at the same time, we need to step back and look at that. Why is that happening? How can we rethink the ways in which we arrange any number of operational matters all the way into our academic and instructional matters. It's a time for rethinking. I'm not ready yet to back away from our goals. This is a fantastic university, and we need to be able to continue to serve the students of Maine and well beyond. We need to make the national and international impact that we make through the students who graduate from here and through the research that we do. We need to find a way to do that in ways that balance this budget, that use our reserves very strategically, and that incorporate new and creative innovations, as well as new ideas about how we can be more efficient when we can, and how we can look at change. Kelly, I see this as an ongoing conversation, but perhaps you can add some clarity.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to add just a couple of comments. One, I think our approach is very different to how we're building our budget this year. So historically, we've done what is called base budgeting. So we've taken the dollars that had been allocated to each unit and we've rolled them over to the following year. And we've said, we think you can do the same amount of work with the same amount of resources without an inflationary increase. And that's been very difficult. And what that's resulted in is each group has had to whittle away a little bit each year in their particular area. And that's very difficult over that 10-year span. That means that some areas feel like they have very realistically have fewer resources to do the same amount of work that they may have had in the past. The approach that we're taking this year is to build a bottoms-up budget to say, what resources do you need to do the work that you're prioritizing for the coming year in FY24? So that's the first question we're asking. And of course, I don't want to be Pollyanna or assume that we can allocate all of the resources that everyone feels would be in the best interest of their unit to do that work. So we're then coming back strategically and saying we need to invest both in faculty and in staff in critical areas to support our students, to support our research, to support the academic mission that we have here institutionally, as well as our community serving institute areas. So we're going to try and pull back in areas. It's going to require some hard conversations. It's going to require review of some of the work that we do, asking ourselves, what work can we stop doing? What are some of the things that we can change? And that's going to also require change management, because it's hard when we value the work that we do. We've been doing it for a long time. And when we try and we take a different look at it and say, maybe I don't do that again, that doesn't feel good as an employee around that work. So we're going to build some committees to evaluate this together. It's not going to be a tops-down approach. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for each area. We're going to work around, we're building 9 different working groups over the coming couple of months where we're going to evaluate administrative opportunities, where we're going to dive in and look at research. We're going to dive in and look at policy and how we can implement and have equity in terms of how we implement policy across the University of Maine and University of Maine Machias. So there's a lot of work yet to be done. As President Ferrini-Mundy said at the beginning, the budget it's a moving document. It's not a one number that never changes over time. And we have to understand the impacts of those decisions as well as we roll them out to make sure that we're continuing to support our critical employees as well as our students as we roll out these changes in the coming years over a 3-year plan. It's an iterative process.
Thank you, Kelly and President Ferrini-Mundy. I think there's a question about sharing the link to the request for the Pathways to Careers proposals. And I believe that the link is going to be shared in the chat with you. So I'm just going to move on to the next question there. And someone else on this panel will let me know if that link cannot be shared that way. So next question, any comments from the panelists on recent legislation we've seen proposed from Senator Tipping about providing tuition waivers at 50% to eligible students, most primarily wondering about any side impacts of lower or capped tuition costs or knock-on effects on retention with that proposal?
I'll take that one. I think, thank you very much for the question. Lots of pieces to that question. I would remind people that I suspect part of what has led to this proposed legislation has to do with legislation and the governor's request last year to provide free tuition to the community colleges. So let me speak a little bit about that first. For our students in Maine, that opportunity, if that suits their educational goals, that's an outstanding opportunity. And what we are doing here at the University of Maine and at UMaine Machias is to make sure that our partnerships with the community colleges are in good shape, that we have articulation agreements, that we have arrangements that would enable the community college students who've benefited from these years of free tuition to then consider options at our universities as well in a smooth and seamless kind of way. So we see the education of the students of Maine, or I do, as a good thing, and the ways in which our university can engage very, very greatly. I'm not going to comment on specific legislation, but I will say that we are very eager to continue to see our enrollments rise. We're very grateful to the governor for her budget proposals for this year, which support the university and the university system generously and include an increase proposed for MEIF, which is our Maine Economic Innovation Fund as well. So many good things happening budget-wise, and our focus here is on bringing students to the University of Maine affordably to provide the outstanding and excellent programs that we offer for them.
Thank you. Okay, and we are, as of right now, at our last question. So great work with efficiency, everyone. Last question, what are the planned investments or strategies for student-focused infrastructure upgrades such as residence halls, and how do we see that as impacting recruitment, retention, et cetera?
I'll go ahead and start, and maybe Vice President Dana or Dean Walsh can add on from a Machias perspective. So we are excited to this year evaluate our residential facilities and how we might make some planned upgrades to them. In the coming year, we will see some lobby or entryway enhancements for first impressions of our residence halls. We had initially planned for 2. We're looking to see if we can upgrade at least 6 of our lobby areas or welcome areas for incoming students for residence halls. So that will give us a little bit of a refresh in the short term. In the longer term, and when I say longer term, 2 to 3 year time frame, we are looking to identify what types of improvements or upgrades we can make in those facilities, thinking restrooms, thinking sinks, thinking the layout of the rooms, and then the programming to support our residential facilities through residential life. So looking to see if we can start to refresh and taking advantage of maybe the moment where we have slightly less than full occupancy of our facilities to take one building and refresh it and then transition that over time. I'll let Vice President Dana talk to some of the impacts from a student life perspective as well.
Thank you. There was a famous song that once said that if you want to be in the shipping business, you've got to be the best at shipping what's needed on time. And confidently, we have got to be in the market of getting our students living learning environments that they want, that they desire, that they say they are coming for. And if you look around the country, it would be at our own peril not to be considering the future in terms of both living but also learning environments. So places where people socialize, recreate, connect, and engage. And we have commitment for that from the president, I believe, her entire cabinet, and others across the University of Maine system. So the time is now. I should say that we really can't delay any longer. We've got to be in that market, and we should get there as soon as possible.
I would just also add from the Machias perspective, we are doing all kinds of refreshing of our buildings, but also we have a wonderful opportunity to create new spaces. We're building a new student lounge, which is beautiful, is going to be beautiful, and that will be open for fall. Just to increase students' ability to connect with one another. And also we'll have more ADA compliant structures. But additionally, we're also evaluating the ways that our housing facilities can serve the needs of other people, particularly here in Washington County, as we understand University of Maine Machias to be really connected to the community. So, for example, the game warden service will be using some of our residence halls, and also this year the Marine Patrol will also be using our residence halls when they're on campus. So, thinking about ways to bring our students, to increase our students' comfort, but then also to think about ways of bringing other people from the community into closer connection with our students and with our campus and the goals that we have here. So thank you.
That is the end of the questions that we have. So I think President Ferrini-Mundy, I turn it back to you for any closing remarks.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the participants, the 215 plus who signed in and out during this session. I invite your continued questions and ideas and suggestions. This is a collaborative community process, and we thank you. I thank you for all that you do for this university, for the University of Maine at Machias, and for the state of Maine. So thank you for that. There are a few other thank yous I'd like to give. First of all, to everybody on the panel who took the time to prepare and participate today. And then general thanks. We're a part of a system, as you all know, the University of Maine system. Great work there in unified accreditation that's involved many of you over the past several months, as well as in strategic planning for the system. And I believe we had an invitation today from the Chancellor to offer more thoughts on the system's strategic plan. So please take advantage of that opportunity for your voice to be heard. I also, we owe gratitude to Governor Mills, to the Maine legislature, tremendous support for this university and for public higher education, as well as to our congressional delegation. All of these folks are a part of our community, are looking to see our success, and are available to help us move ahead. Thank you all for coming today. Again, enjoy the first day of spring. I'm told it's going to get warmer, so we'll hope that that actually happens. And we'll continue with another town hall later on in the coming weeks. Get your questions in and let us know your ideas. Thank you.